Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Qonnect APAC. We're excited to get started. Just a few housekeeping things to go over before we jump in. First off, if you have to leave at some point in the middle of this, don't worry, we're going to record this. It'll be available on our YouTube channel here in a few weeks. Also, if you have a question or want to make a comment, please make sure to utilize the chat function. You're going to want to make sure that that is selected to everybody, not just panelists and hosts. We will be picking 2 random people to win a prize if you ask a question, so make sure to type something in the chat. All right, first up, we have Ben, our VP of Product, who's going to give us an overview of Qumulo. Ben, take it away.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Sam, for the introduction. Sam and all the crew that put this together, a big thank you to you and to Brandon, and as well especially to Jason, our special guest, a great customer here at Qumulo. So thanks, everybody, and welcome. I'm really excited to talk to you about Qumulo and what we do here and how we help customers who work with large-scale unstructured data. My name is Ben Gittenstein. I run the product team here at Qumulo. I've been with Qumulo for a while now, over 6 years. And I'm just super passionate about what we do and how we help customers. So thank you all for joining, and thanks for spending a little bit of time with us. Let's jump right in, Sam. Let's get going. So let's start with a little bit of our why. Why do we do what we do? And what is it we do to help customers? We help customers build petabyte scale file data lakes really simply. And we help them do that both in the cloud and on premises, i.e. in your data center. We do that on AWS, on Microsoft Azure, on Google Cloud, in your data center, on HPE platforms, on Fujitsu platforms, on Supermicro, and then as well on Arrow and Intel-based platforms. All of those are available today. We do that because we believe that file data really matters. We believe that it's used by organizations like all of yours to build awesome, amazing innovations. And we're just really excited to help you all do the work that you do. So with that, let's keep going forward. By the way, I just have to say before we jump in, I am so excited to come out and visit all of you. I have never been to Sydney, and I would love to come to Sydney and all the other geographies and countries represented on this call. I am super excited to get out there and visit all of you. So good afternoon to all of you. And good morning, and I'm really excited to meet all of you. So let's talk a little bit about the environment in which we live. Unstructured data is where Qumulo, that's our bread and butter. We are an unstructured data company. And one of the big challenges in the world of unstructured data is about the divergence between how that data is growing and how the resources are growing that we all use to manage that data, the difference between those 2 growth rates. And simply put, data is growing faster than budgets. And that creates a real problem. By the way, that's always been true, but it's so much truer today than it was even just 5 years ago. The rate of data growth is growing so fast. And I think, as all of you know, the rate of your budgets is not growing at that same pace. And that creates a bunch of big problems. It creates problems in managing that data. It creates problems in keeping that data. Often you may find yourselves not even being able to keep all the data that you need. It creates problems in staffing. I'm just having the people around to keep your organizations running successfully so you can achieve your mission. That's a real problem out in the world. And that's something we get very, very interested in helping alleviate or solve. So how does that show up as like an existential or everyday experience? Well, the real problem is at the storage layer. That storage that provides, that enables you to serve unstructured data can't scale with the rate of data growth. You have to deal with legacy vendors that, to be frank, are really difficult to work with, either because of their support model or because of their selling model or because of the way their products work. It's really difficult to move unstructured data workloads into the public cloud, given the products that are available to you today. You got a data visibility problem. How do you see your data and see who's using it and why they're using it and what their experience is in real time? Well, with a petabyte of data and a billion files, that can be a real problem. And then, of course, there's cost and complexity. Just managing all of that data, the number of human beings that you need, the number of systems that you have in place to manage all of that data is growing way too fast. And the cost of storing all of that data is just gone insane. And then the last big problem that we hear a lot from customers is about automation. A lot of the products that were built to store and manage unstructured data, they were built in an age when automation was not done through APIs. And automation, honestly, was mostly an idea. It wasn't the way we think of automation today. And that means those legacy products really can't be automated, not in a modern universal approach. And Qumulo really set out as a product to solve these problems. So how does that show up for you as a customer? What does that mean for the life of your business? Well, it leads to a big question about your future. Can the platform that you've chosen for your unstructured data meet your future needs? Or are you stuck in a silo that won't grow with you as your business evolves? Complexity, the complexity of your current system that leads directly to cost, and it leads directly to a fundamental breaking point, such that as your data grows, your infrastructure can't keep pace. Support. I mean, I don't think anybody on this call would raise their hand and say, I've really enjoyed my support experience with my legacy storage vendor. No one wants to be on the phone in the middle of the night submitting tickets and asking to speak to a manager. I want to use intelligent systems like AI and ML on my data, not just to store it. I want to understand what's going on with my data, and I want to be sure that my data is actually being intelligently put on the correct media, and that requires an intelligent storage system in and of itself. I want to move to the cloud on my own pace and my own schedule. Well, that's not really possible with the legacy systems that are around today. And then finally, I keep coming back to people because for me, that's a big motivator. The IT administrators that you all work with, or maybe you are today, are just stretched too thin. And that's not a sustainable model for running a large-scale innovation organization. So Qumulo's goal here is to solve those problems by taking a file system and freeing it from its previous constraints. We do that by building what we call the unified file data management platform that runs in the data center on what we call server queue that requires no proprietary hardware, offers a world-class support that's focused on you as a customer, not resolution time, and that enables an actual hybrid workflow where you can move data back and forth between on-prem and cloud on your pace, and runs natively on all major clouds, which enables you right away to de-risk your cloud migration. So you can jump to the cloud on your pace without the big risk of the second problem, re-architecting your applications. You do not need to re-architect or refactor your applications as you use Qumulo in the public cloud. And lastly, in the public cloud, you get the same hyperscale for file data in the cloud that the cloud native services provide for object, which enables you to take your entire data estate when you're ready and move it natively into the public cloud. So what is Qumulo? It's funny how that question requires a big picture, but this is how we describe the Qumulo system. And let's start with the data, because I think for every customer on here, you're here because data is the lifeblood of your organization. Qumulo really, at its heart, is a data platform that is meant to serve the entire lifecycle of your data, from ingest, so the writing of data from a device, whether that's a 4K camera or a genomic sequencer, through transformation when you use large-scale compute or just a really powerful end user to take that raw data and turn it into something more valuable and powerful, to publishing and sharing that data out to end users or new applications or new locations, and finally archiving it for the long term. The whole purpose of the Qumulo file data platform is to serve all of that from one system. Within the Qumulo file data platform, at its heart is Qumulo Core. That's the name of our software, our file system that runs everywhere and runs uniformly. So what your experience on premises on an HPE server will be the same as your experience in AWS running on a series of instances. At the heart of Qumulo Core are 7 data services. There's Qumulo Scale. That's our ability to serve very large scale namespaces and to grow dynamically with you. Qumulo Perform, that's how we use AI and ML to make sure your data lives on the hottest media and that we can serve your most demanding workloads. Qumulo Aware, this is actually sort of our founding innovation. It's the ability to give you deep and rich insight into your workloads from the point of view of the data. Qumulo Shift. Shift enables you to move data from any Qumulo cluster into AWS S3 as a native object, and then to move it back. Qumulo Integrate is a name for our API. So we have a full, rich, self-documenting API, which you can use to completely automate any action in the Qumulo system, including the creation and destruction of a cluster. Qumulo Protect is our data protection suite. So that's things like replication, snapshots, and just the ability to protect data from a component failure. And finally, Qumulo Secure. Our software is encrypted by default, and no matter where you run it, as well as it offers features like RBAC, really rich permissions models, and of course, auditing and logging. Qumulo Core runs in the cloud on Cloud Q and runs in the cloud on Cloud Q, which runs on Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud, and it runs in your data center on HPE, Supermicro, and Fujitsu, and we call that Server Q. Okay, now let's go forward one. So why don't you go ahead and build this slide all the way out? This is just a picture of how the Qumulo product has evolved since its inception. We launched our first product in 2015, and we have relentlessly innovated on behalf of our customers every year since. At the heart of that is a 2-week release cadence. We ship new versions of our software every 2 weeks. You do not have to take that upgrade. You can upgrade on your own cadence. Those upgrades are simple, easy, and non-disruptive. But every 2 weeks, we religiously and relentlessly ship new software to our customers because we believe that the value of our product should only increase over time, not decrease, which is why we sell a subscription. And it's really important to remember that that subscription is all inclusive. So if you are a subscriber in 2016, the value of your product only increased over time as new capabilities were released. One of the things we're most proud of here at Qumulo is the recognition we achieve from analysts, not because the analysts themselves really matter, but because those analysts talk to our customers to figure out if our product is valuable. We have now for 4 years in a row been recognized as a leader in the particular Magic Quadrant which we serve, which is Gartner's distributed file and object category. We've been a leader in the top right of that Magic Quadrant for the last 4 years. And in fact, in this last year, we moved up and to the right more than any other player. And we actually technically were graded as having the most complete vision for our category. So that's something we're super proud of, and we really are relentless about constantly improving. That industry leadership isn't just limited to Gartner. We see it all over the place with various other industry leaders like IDC and others see that same thing, GigaOM, what have you. The thing I think we're probably most excited about is our Net Promoter Score. Customers give us, we have an 89 NPS. In fact, we just refreshed that yesterday, again for this quarter. It's now at 11 consecutive quarters of 80 plus. And that's something we take super seriously. I know a lot of vendors say that, but for us here at Qumulo, that really is our lifeblood. And it's something that really rallies us as a team. So I'm going to give you a couple pictures of some customers that work with, just to give you a sense of the kind of folks that use Qumulo. And then we'll turn it over to Jason to talk about FuseFX and how they invent new content using Qumulo's platform. So let's talk about children's healthcare here at a customer in the United States called Dayton Children's. Dayton Children's is a large-scale hospital, and they use Qumulo to store a ton of medical imagery data. Medical imagery is one of the fastest growing use cases for Qumulo. And it's really because as healthcare images grow richer and as there are more healthcare images of all of those procedures that we're all having done, or our medical records, or what have you, hospitals in particular need places to store that data and serve it reliably to their doctors and healthcare professionals. An adjacent use case we'll hear a lot about from customers is also genomic sequencing and all of the storage of sequencing data that often happens in hospitals. That's something we're really excited about and happens a lot on the Qumulo platform, and we're seeing a lot of traction. Okay. And then the last customer use case I thought I'd talk a little bit about is more of a classic high performance computing use case. There's a research university here on the West Coast of the United States called San Diego State. It's San Diego Supercomputing Center. SDSC uses Qumulo for a lot of projects. We back a lot of their environments, but one of the biggest projects they use us for is to track wildfires across the United States using large scale, both geographic data and log data. And they use that to build really rich interactive maps, but also to make predictions. For those of you who work in organizations that have large scale data that is then used by large scale compute, either in a research setting or a university setting, or a classic HPC setting, this is exactly what that is. This is that kind of use case. We're in probably 50 research universities around North America, and more if you broaden out to EMEA and APAC. And we're really proud of all those customers and the way they really push our product. So with that, let's talk to an actual customer. And to do that, we're going to start with FuseFX. Jason Fodder is the co-founder and CTO of Fuse, and he's here to talk to us about what Fuse does and how they use Qumulo. I want to welcome Jason. Jason,
thank you.
Hey, how are you? Sorry we didn't get to play your audio, but somebody posted a link to your sizzle reel on YouTube, which is probably a better experience than watching it over Zoom anyways, and I'd recommend everybody go do it because it's pretty freaking cool.
Absolutely. Our website has a whole lot more too, if people are interested, fusefx.com. So, well,
Jason, maybe I'll start with just sort of a softball. I mean, tell us about FuseFX. Tell us about the company you built, what you guys do, and where you sit.
So back in 2008, I joined a couple of my other partners and decided to have the crazy idea we want to start a visual effects company. And started down that path, very quickly built up a nice little 20-30 person shop, and that was back in 2008, 9, 10, prior to Qumulo days. I think especially on your slide, you mentioned 2015 being the moment. So Isilon was really the major player in clustered storage at that time, so we jumped on that ship and started using that as our primary storage system. And once I became aware of Qumulo and particularly those analytic dashboards that were really at the very beginning of the product, that got me really intrigued. I have an interesting story to tell about how we've leveraged that after adopting your solution, but became early customers. Must have been in 2015, I think, with our 4-node QC208 cluster that is still in our data center and still operational.
Yeah.
So, it definitely has longevity there. And started to really create a nice back and forth conversation with you all about features and products. Early on, it was an early product, so we were trying to put it in production and had lots of feedback on what we thought it should be and some of the issues we were running into. And you guys were always very responsive to me and others in our industry, so thank you. We grew as a company and started to build multiple offices, and that was around 2014, 15, 16, I think. I started to come across the word cloud, and I was like, oh, what's this? I really hadn't thought of it, nor had I connected it to our business per se, and started to think, well, what is the cloud? And quickly learned it's virtual infrastructure, and you could spin up, Linux servers and compute servers to do certain things. And I'm like, man, that would be really, really great if we could render in the cloud. Rendering is, the process of using a massive compute farm to generate the imagery we create and store it on a file system. So we started to build our own homegrown kind of feature inside AWS to do this. Quickly learned that a file system is a critical component, not only on-prem, but also in a cloud environment to scaling. right? In our world, it's all about throughput and IOPS, particularly IOPS. And once you max out any one of those of a storage platform, you're kind of dead in the water of being able to scale beyond that. So I started to talk to any storage vendor that would listen to me about the cloud and like, look, we have this workflow in the cloud. We can only go so far because of the storage system I have in place. Boy, here's what we do on-prem. We have clustered NAS solutions that I can just scale out as big as I want to based on the performance I need. Man, if I had that in the cloud in a virtual way and it was easy to scale it, that would be amazing. I got a lot of lip service from a lot of vendors. I got a lot of, yeah, we could do that. How about we go to our private cloud? Or yeah, we could do that. Oh, great. Show me something. Yeah, that's on our 2-year roadmap. Okay. You guys came along and were like, yeah, we think we could do that. And I was like, great, when could I see something? And I think weeks later, we had a single server running a Qumulo file system on it. And I was like, this is pretty cool. It was already faster than what we had. And then I was like, well, if you could make a 4-node cluster, which I think was the minimum at the time, we're golden. Like, you give me that in the cloud, we're done. I think a couple of weeks later, you guys literally did it. And it was super exciting. And in a moment where I was like, wow, you're really listening. You're really given me, our company at the time, what we're asking for, and that really stuck with me along the way. So we started to really push hard on this system. It became a release valve for us when we would exhaust our on-premise infrastructure and we needed to like get a job done in a certain amount of time, and it became somewhat limitless where we could scale the cluster and we could scale the compute environment attached to it. Well, we ran into a moment where, back to the data analytics, really, the throughput and IOPS, your dashboard when you log into a cluster that you see, I was always really excited about being able to drill down at the file or the host level, because I was like, there's a moment where I'm going to need this. And we had a moment where our cloud cluster was pegged at its IOPS. I think at the moment that cluster could do about 60,000 IOPS. And it was flatlining. I mean, you could just see on the graphs, like something was going on. Normal graphs are kind of up and down, maybe some spikes and more sawtooth. This was just flatline. And I was like, something's wrong. Well, lo and behold, it was a single file on the file system that Qumulo was reporting as consuming all of the IOPS on the cluster. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So we started to drill down. We figured out the file. That we were able to connect that to V-Ray, our rendering system, reached out to Chaos Group and V-Ray and said, what is this file? Why is it, can you explain why it would generate so much noise on the file system? They told us, well, we're not sure, but don't use that file. Don't use that process anymore. Here's a different way to use V-Ray, and you don't have to generate that file. Try that and see if that, helps. And we did, and it worked. So while we didn't, if we had to still create that file, we had to figure out deeper what was going on. But because we were able to quickly point to the file of problem, devise an alternate solution, I think we came up with that within a day. I've had similar experiences with other storage vendors where trying to get down to the actual file of what is causing problems is almost impossible. You got to get some high-level engineer to run a bunch of terminal commands and generate some data that he feeds back to you a day later. And it's like, well, that wasn't very useful because that was a day ago and now we've moved on. So that experience was great from a support perspective, great that we were able to use the features of the file system that were there. And I don't know if I hope that happens again or not, because it's a little disruptive, but if it does, I feel like we're prepared. So fast forward to today, we have Qumulo clusters in our tier 1 environment for all of our Fuse locations. And we are actively progressing with, we have a couple of partnerships that we've established now with folks out of Montreal and Toronto, and Rising Sun Pictures out of Australia. And so now we are a multi-location, we were a multi, now we're even bigger, multi-location company across the globe, really looking at the kind of the next phase of the company here, and trying to service, the demands in media and entertainment. We all know, the productions are exploding, content is exploding. There's a slew of content out there being created, and we're trying to keep up.
How would you say that, just one last question, how would you say that Qumulo, and as your business has evolved, what role would you say Qumulo played in your business evolving? And then how do you think your business looks different today than it looked at the beginning of the journey?
Yeah. I mean, the beginning of the journey was one location. It was LA. It was like, okay, we thought we would build a nice little boutique visual effects shop, and didn't really think about multi-location strategies until we thought about Vancouver and New York as satellite offices. So that was, the birth of the company. Today, it's all about multi-location, hybrid approaches. How do we move data? How do we get it to where it needs to go? The complexities of that. I mean, visual effects, we generate a lot of data. We have 2.5 petabytes in LA, 1.5 petabytes in New York and Vancouver each. So there's a tremendous amount of data. So moving that data is a challenge. You want to stage it in a way that it's ready when the user needs it, but you don't want to just copy everything, because that balloons your storage footprint, and then you've just got multiple copies everywhere. We're actively looking at the cloud, products like S3. How can we store libraries of data on S3 and shift it literally to on-premise high-performance storage systems when the need is there, but not necessarily have to replicate all that data around. So, going from that, we're just going to have a single location that does good visual effects, to multiple locations, all intertwined, sharing resources. It's become a complex environment, and Qumulo sits underneath all of that, and we're constantly looking at ways to leverage Qumulo in ways to help us move that data as efficiently as possible.
Well, I guess that sets up my really truly last question for you, which is, like, as you think about the future, and here I want to be sort of transparent with all these new folks that are a little bit newer to Qumulo. This is a regular conversation that you and I have as the head of product and as one of our founding customers. Sort of, what do you hope to see from Qumulo? What are the problems that we can solve for you next that really make us a part of your infrastructure in the future?
The term global namespace is really what comes to mind. You have a single location that has its set of data on a particular cluster, and then you have another location that has its data. You can create replication targets, but what if those two locations truly need to collaborate with each other? We're looking at other ways to solve that. You can look at products like Teradici, where you can extend the user experience, but that only goes so far. Latency in this world is always a factor you have to deal with. We can't have users directly mounting storage systems if it's too much latency, because the performance is going to fall down. So we have to architect these solutions across the board. But the goal is that whether it's an extended user access point like Teradici, or whether it's a directly mounted file system, can the file system underneath it do all the heavy lifting where data is available when users need it, when a render machine needs to spin up a render, read a bunch of source files, generate an output image. That's where I'm looking for more innovation, more features to come down the line to help us do that. Because if we can be effective in doing that, we just can move work around. We can place work where it needs to go in any location and be really effective and a highly efficient business.
That's awesome. By the way, I'm super excited to work with you on building all that stuff, because I think it's absolutely where the future is.
Couple weeks, just like the cloud cluster, right?
Yeah, give me a couple weeks. Yeah. Hey, Sam, I think that wraps up the portion between me and Jason for now. And I think now would be a great time to bring on Brendan and talk a little bit about the Qumulo product, give people a demo.
All right. Thanks for that. Jason, Ben, that was a good little interaction, and it only took a week to get that cloud cluster up. So that's good segue into what I'm about to do, because I'm going to set up a Qumulo cluster in AWS now. But hopefully it won't take me a week. We can only do that for you in a couple of minutes. So today I'm going to show you the process of actually creating a Qumulo cluster inside of AWS. We're going to set up that replication from this on-premises Qumulo cluster that we have in our lab to a Qumulo cluster in AWS. And we're going to fail over from our primary cluster to this cluster in AWS. Then we'll fail back to our primary cluster again. So really, this whole process of standing up Qumulo in an AWS environment, we're going to configure the replication. We're going to simulate that sort of DR event. We are going to fail over to it and fail back. And hopefully you should see that it won't take very long to do as well. So I think with that, let's get things started. All right, first thing we're going to do is log into our AWS environment and check for any existing Qumulo file systems. So we can see here that there are no Qumulo file systems. So what we're going to do is to set up this environment is run a Terraform script to provision a Qumulo cluster inside of AWS, do all that heavy lifting. So while we get this up and running and the process going, we'll flip over to our console and we'll see and refresh here that we can now see a cluster being set up inside of AWS. The provisioning process has completed, which the Terraform script has run, and now we will simply log into our Qumulo cluster using our username and our password, and you can see that we've logged into our Qumulo cluster now. We can see that this is a new file system and there's no data in here currently. And since the file system is very new and very fresh, the numbers are all pretty much close to 0. So if we come over here and look at our SMB shares, we can see that we have a default share that comes up with the new Qumulo file system deployment. There's no data here, no real sort of configuration has been performed yet. So the next thing we want to do is actually connect to the file system from a client. So just minimize this, and we're going to have to open our file browser here. I need to grab the file system IP address. So we'll just jump back to the UI and we can copy that from the top. And we paste that into the window. Now I want to browse to my Qumulo file system in AWS. I should be prompted for authentication here. And this is where I want to put in just my credentials for this, for accessing this cluster in the cloud. And you'll see that my files should come up and there it is. I have no data in here. Next thing that we want to do is we want to connect to the local file system. So my on-premises cluster, we're going to open a new file browser. And in this case, we're going to browse to the local cluster Qumulo 1. This is my on-premises instance. And again, I'm going to be asked for some credentials. This is obviously a different file system. It's the on-premises one. So we'll enter those credentials here. We'll see that we actually have a couple of shares now on the on-premises file system. We've got NFS, SMB, and what we'll do now is log into our Qumulo UI on this file system, and you can see as we log in, we should see some data there. Yeah, so 1.718 gig. Dashboard shows some data there. Again, this is a fairly new cluster though, so we stood this up for demo purposes in our lab. There isn't a lot of historical performance data, but there's a tiny bit there. What we'll do now is establish a replication relationship on my on-premises cluster. So we'll click replicate. We're going to create relationship. And for the source, I'm going to do my entire directory. So we'll just start from root, and I want to replicate that to my Qumulo file system that's sitting in AWS. So we'll need to grab the IP address for that and copy that and paste that into the field. And we will click Save Relationship. All right, now you'll see it tells me that it's awaiting authorization on the target cluster. So I'm going to go to my file system in AWS where it lets me know that there's a pending authorization request for replication, and we're just going to click Authorize to authorize it. Now that that's completed, if we go back over to our primary cluster, so we here in a few seconds, we should see that there it goes. So the replication started. I can view the details of this relationship and see things like the throughput, how much data has been written or deleted or remains unchanged as a part of this replication process. And now while that's running, if we go back over and begin to look at our file system in AWS, you'll see that I have the same NFS and SMB directories inside of the file folders now in AWS because of that replication relationship between on-premises and the AWS cluster. So now when we create replication pairings, the file system on the primary side is naturally it's read-write. But the file system that we are replicating to in the cloud, that's a read-only relationship. So if I try and take this Ice Age folder now and just drag it over here into the AWS system, it's going to say that, you know, you can't do it, access is denied, you can't write to that system. But if I take that same folder and drag and drop it to my on-premises cluster, not only does it copy, but it's really here within a few seconds. And we should see that the Qumulo file system will pick up that change from the primary side, and it should replicate over to the AWS instance. Once I hit refresh here, and boom. All right, so we can see now that the replication has picked up those changes, and I can now see the Ice Age folder in my file system on AWS, and the contents actually should match there. So let's just recap what we've demonstrated here. We've quickly stood up a Qumulo file system in AWS. We've replicated some of that existing data over to it. Now let's simulate a scenario where my primary Qumulo file system is unavailable. The easiest way to do that is to go in here and simply shut this cluster down. So in doing so, I now no longer have access to the files on my Qumulo cluster on the primary site. And if I try and browse my data over there and refresh that, of course, it's just going to sit there and spin because we no longer have access to it. But I still have access to my Qumulo file system that's sitting in AWS. So the only challenge being that my Qumulo file system in AWS is still read-only. So the first thing that we want to do is to go into my replication view in this AWS-based cluster, and we're going to make this target writable. We'll get this window pop up to explain that the changes are going to be made as a part of the process, and we click yes, make target writable. And then now if I come over to my folder here, let's say I want to move this twister folder, we'll see that now I can write to this file system, and it has begun copying that data, all 1,271 files into the AWS instance. Now, while that's all copying over, let's go ahead and power back up and revive our on-premises cluster. So what I'll do there is to get that started back up for us, I need to get back to my browser and bring up the on-premises clusters UI. Once we navigate here, we just do the opposite of what we did and power it back on. And it's currently saying it's not available, but once it does come back online, it should refresh and it should let us know that the cluster is booting back up. Oh, it's already happened. We can see now that its file system is back and online. If we look at the replication status now, currently our replication status says that it's disconnected. So we'll just need to change that. The target is currently writable. We're going to now, because we made those changes on the cloud side in AWS, we've written that data during that DR event, that simulated DR event. We want to make sure that the replicated changes go back to the primary site now on premises, and so that we don't lose any of that data, including any of those changes that occurred during that DR event. It looks like all the files are copied. So we want to come in here onto our Qumulo file system on AWS, and I want to reverse that relationship pairing. And this is the information that just summarizes all of those changes. And I want to tell what cluster it was just to confirm where I want to replicate it back to. So we'll just have to grab the on-premises IP address for this. And we'll plug that in here for the IP address for it to replicate back to. And we're going to hit reverse relationship. The next thing we'll need to do is just reconnect the on-premises cluster to the file system in AWS. So we're going to come to our on-premises Qumulo file system and click reconnect relationship. So that's just the ellipses here on the side and reconnect. Then tells me that the source is my Qumulo file system in AWS. It's going to replicate to this cluster. And in the after configuration, the cluster is going to be read-only, and that's okay. So we are going to click yes, reconnect. Now, if we go look at our file data that we have for these two file systems, you'll notice that our on-premises Qumulo file system on the left is already starting to pick up some of these changes and replicating that twister folder back to our on-premises Qumulo file system. Now, basically, to get back to the way things were at the very beginning, the process is as simple as coming into here and making the target writable on the primary side once again. So we click that and it reverts back to making it writable. And we want to reverse this relationship back. So click here for that. And then on the AWS side, we just want to come over here and simply reconnect the relationship, which tells us at the end of our on-premises Qumulo file system is going to be writable once again. And our Qumulo file system in AWS is again going to be read-only. And that's really it. That's the process of failing over and failing black a Qumulo file system and from on-premises to AWS and back again. So that was very quick, I know, but that's really just to illustrate how simple this whole process is. And I think with that, we're going to throw to Sam to MC a few questions.
Yes, thanks, Brendan. That was great. So a question for you, actually, just based on the demo you just gave. You showed replication and failover, failback on-premises cluster to the cloud. Is on-prem to on-prem possible? And what if this was cloud to cloud?
Okay, that's a good question. So I did do on-premises to cloud, the exact same set of menu and functionality. You can go from on-premises to on-premises. You can go from cloud to cloud, and you can have your cloud as your primary site and your on-premises as your secondary site. And you can do it that way as well. So the example I gave was just on-premises to AWS, but it's very flexible and you can choose multiple sites and multiple targets.
Thanks for that. You spoke about this as a DR example. Can you replicate this on Qumulo for more of a backup scenario?
Well, I guess, yeah, you could do that. It's basically going to be leveraging our snapshots. Replication relationships can be created for this, continuous replication, as well as replicating sort of point in time snapshots. The snapshots are all immutable as well, so they can be easily used to recover data at a known point in time. So we do have customers sort of using it for backups in that sense.
Yeah, I think the only difference there, Brendan, right, is you'd probably want to bring more of the snapshot functionality into that workflow than what you happened to show in that demo, which is we have a pretty rich set of snapshot capabilities. The other thing you can do is you can replicate your snapshots, and you can also set differential snapshot policies on source and target. So for what's pretty common with all of the concerns about ransomware out there today is you can have a source cluster with, say, daily snapshots that are kept for a week, and then you can have a target cluster with longer term snapshots that only roll off at the end of, say, a year, and that can give you a nice long-term backup in the case of an attack.
Great. Just a reminder for everybody, if you do have any questions, please feel free to either type them in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll get to them. Another one that came up is when sizing a Qumulo solution, say, for example, 500 terabyte solution, what is the highest utilization percentage of storage customer can expect without noticing degradation in the performance?
Yep. Okay. So I think that might be in relation to, how full can a Qumulo cluster get before it starts facing this degradation that I think some other vendors out there do experience as they sort of get beyond 75 and 80% full of capacity. The good thing with Qumulo is that we do have customers running right up to 98, 99, almost 100% full, and they're still experiencing great performance. So we're not seeing that same degradation and that plateau of performance that occurs in some of the competing file systems out there in the market today.
All right, we've got another question in. I'm from India. Is there a data center here in India?
There are many data centers in India, but I'm thinking you're asking in specific reference to Qumulo data centers. And I guess the answer to that is no, because we don't offer a data center type of service, right? We are a software defined storage solution. We provide the subscription licenses that will run on equipment that will be installed in any data centers around the world. So hopefully that clarifies it a bit more.
All right, another one. Thanks everybody for the questions. These are great. Can the replication between on-prem and the cloud failover be automated?
The replication between on-prem and cloud can be somewhat automated through some API and scripting, but there will still need to be, I guess, some form of human interaction to hit the big red button to trigger the APIs and the scripts to actually trigger over. So you don't have to sit there and click making targets writable and reversing the relationship. All those steps that I did in the UI, they can be all scripted out and abstracted through our REST API. So we do have customers that do that. And it certainly does have a lot of automation there to help save some time as well.
Okay, another question came in. On the roadmap, is there an option to add speed acceleration on IOPS without adding capacity?
It's a roadmap question, Ben.
It's an interesting one. We don't actually have any plans to build our own. I know some other products build like a storageless acceleration node. That's not something we're looking at right now, mostly because we have a lot of flexibility for how we can add capacity. In the cloud, however, that actually is very much part of our long-term cloud strategy. And that's because the cloud offers us so much more flexibility in how that can work. So actually in our cloud products, what you'll see us offer over time is the ability to scale performance and capacity totally independently of each other.
Thanks for that. Okay, we've got two more questions. Where can I find all the supported technologies with Qumulo?
I think that means the maybe a hardware compatibility list, as in the type of appliances and OEMs that we support. So do you want to take that, Ben?
Yeah, the best place to start is Qumulo.com. Because on there, you'll find a full list of what we call our server queue platforms. Right from there, you'll see a series of data sheets and all of the options that you have in on which to run Qumulo. You can also find in there a whole section on Qumulo Core, which is our file system itself. So you can see all of the capabilities that Qumulo Core offers. Lastly, there is a section on Cloud Queue where you can see all of the options you have for deploying in AWS, Azure, and GCP. They do vary a little bit because the clouds are so different. And one thing we touched on, but maybe didn't go really too deeply into, is that there is a big difference between Azure, AWS, and GCP in that in Azure, we actually offer a fully managed software service. So you can buy Qumulo completely as a service, pay as you go, and you never have to do any upgrades of any kind. We'll offer that completely for you. So, but other than that, you should just jump right in and go learn about all of our supported technologies on Qumulo.com.
Yeah, but I think beyond that, the OEM vendors that we support today is obviously we support deployments on HPE. We've got our own Qumulo appliance, and then we also have a newfound relationship with Supermicro as well.
Okay, two more and then we'll wrap this up. One more question on replication. When you replicate on-prem to the cloud, is there any acceleration applied?
Sorry, can you repeat that, please?
I think the person's asking, when you replicated in this example from on-prem to the cloud, is there any acceleration? Did you speed anything up?
Oh, right. The only thing that was sped up a tiny bit was the formation using the Terraform script. That whole process takes about 2 minutes, and I didn't want to just wait for that script to run up. So 2 minutes is still a lot quicker than the 1 week, right? That Mr. Potter had to wait for his cloud instance. But other than that, it was pretty real time. And if anybody out there in APAC, wishes to trial any of this stuff, the good thing is we've got a virtual instance of Qumulo that is also available that we could just show you, and you could actually run a replication job and see what your connectivity is like and how that would affect it.
Brendan, I love that you just answered the last question, which is there a sandbox or demo environment available for customers to trial the software?
Yeah, we've got two ways for customers to trial it. There is a on our website, you can try it using our labs online, or we can work with you to provide you with the OVA files so that we can run up a virtual instance of it on your actual site. Because it is a virtualized instance, though, you won't see the same sort of performance as you would on a proper hardware appliance-based 4-node cluster. But what you will see is all the functionality, all the APIs, all the menus. That's the sort of thing that you might want to test, and that works 100% in the same way.
Thank you for that. On that note, everybody, thank you so much for joining us for the Qonnect event. We really appreciate it. If there were any questions that were not answered, we will be following up with you via email. We will be selecting 2 of you that submitted questions to randomly win a prize, so keep an eye on your email. And as an extra special thank you, we'll be sending you all an Uber Eats gift card that'll be in your inbox before this weekend. So thank you again. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, and have a wonderful day. Thanks.